Hello, everyone, and welcome to Off the Hook with Matty D. I am your host, Matt DiNardo, and to me, there is no better time to fish than the fall. And as you know, I lived up in upstate New York for close to a dozen years, maybe a little bit more, and I constantly fished either the Salmon River or the western tribs off of Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, and I love the migration of salmon, steelhead, and browns. And a couple of weeks ago, we had on Garrett Brancy from the Douglaston Salmon Run, one of the places that I often fish. And while I fish there, I constantly see a number of guides. And one guide has really caught my eye over the past, 25 years as I fished there. And the way he handled his clients, the way that he teaches his clients the river, the way that he respects other anglers on the river really moved me. I just loved what he did. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, would you come on and talk about your fishing, your guide, your species of fish that you go for? And his name is Jay Peck, and Jay absolutely said, hey, I'll come on, Matty D. And so here he is, Jay Peck from Jay Peck Guides and Lost Rivers Fishing. Jay, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, you're welcome. You're welcome. Glad to be here.
It really is. I think let me start there. The way that you work with your clients, I see you at different portions of the Salmon River, specifically, sometimes lower in the DSR. And I think you handle your clients well. You teach them etiquette. You really do an excellent job. And so kudos to you, because to what I watch, it's not just about, hey, let's get into 100 fish today. You're really teaching techniques and etiquette and proper fishing elements there.
Yeah, that's, I found that as a guide, sometimes we end up setting the example.
Yeah.
And, so taking the time to teach everybody to go through this fisheries and be effective, how to fish around a lot of other people, it really pays off huge in the long run. Because often people are starting to trip out with me getting dialed in, and if I can help them, get dialed in for the rest of their trip, that's, I feel, part of my job.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Jay, I should mention you are literally up on the Salmon River right now. Let's talk a little bit about, before we get into things, how is your season going so far? I know it just started a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, we're off to it's an interesting start, to say the least. We are definitely in a drought year.
Mm-hmm.
And so the river's flowing right now at summer minimum of 185. That's 185 CFS, which is our minimum water flow, which in reality is not a big deal, even though we are in trouble with water flows.
Right.
The fish can navigate that river just fine. What's nice is we don't have to fish heavy flies, heavy sink tips, a little extra weight. We can fish very light and some real petite flies, and it just makes it casting and fishing actually a little easier. To fish are very showy, but it also gives us the problem of that lower water flows too, some management problems. Plus, as for the fish themselves, they're trying to run.
Yep.
We're off to what I would call a typical start with the fish numbers.
Right.
Everybody's wonders where they all are, but right now, immediately we're fishing for a fish or two, and as things go on, the numbers will improve, but it looks like we're kind of on track.
And one of the things that I do want to start with, since you did mention you are in a drought, the hot news, if you will, listed a couple of weeks ago now, or a week ago, is that the lower fly zone has been shut down because of the low water. Now, you were instrumental back in the day, and we'll get into this later, to help and to navigate, you and others at DEC, natural reproduction in this river, because that's a huge thing. And so the lower fly zone is a natural reproduction area. It's been marked off as that. And now being shut down until October 31st or November 1st, does it make, I know it's a short stretch, but does it make some of the other portions of the river more crowded, or not really?
It's definitely going to move a handful, it is a very popular section in the fall, and it gets very busy. So it's going to push some fishing pressure up to the upper fly zone and some of it down through the, basically below the bridge to the Altmar, what I call the, upper river from Altmar to Pineville. Yeah, it will move a handful of people around it through there, but it's closing it right now is good management.
Yep.
Ironically, it's being closed not as much for natural reproduction purposes as to make sure that the hatchery, the department gets the fish they need for propagation.
I see.
Because we've learned in the past that sometimes that activity, that fishing activity, will disturb those fish enough where they'll shoot through the system and miss what I call, half jokingly, the right-hand turn, because there's Beaver Dam Brook, and so they kind of come up. They get that wire was placed in the upper end more to make sure that the fish kind of find their right-hand turn and they make it. But when low waters, those fish sit and try to figure out that right-hand turn a little bit more into fishing zones. And when fish feel a little bit of this, salmon particularly when they're disturbed, they go forward. And of course, now they're into that faster water, it's a little bit shallower, and they've been under some pressure, so they're going to have a tendency to just dart forward, just with normal fishing activity, and they'll sometimes miss that turn, and they'll end up in the upper fly zone over getting into the hatcheries. That's the primary reason for closing it.
And that Beaver Dam Brook that you mentioned, that is the right-hand turn that goes to the gates at the hatchery that then brings them through the ladder. That's correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And of course, there is an awful lot of natural reproduction going through. I kind of jokingly call it a spawning mash pit when it gets rolling. I mean, to see that and all the fish stacked down through there is impressive.
Yeah. It really is. It is amazing. You know, after a hard day of fishing, you walk and maybe you only landed one, you saw two. You go up to the hatchery and you go, well, there's all my fish.
Yeah, you walk in there and you wonder, you see all these fish stacked all over the place. And you're like, was I blind or what?
How did I miss them? I should have been here yesterday. Hey,
you're cleaning your glasses thinking that you missed something.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, so I want to circle back for just a bit. Let's kind of get a little background on you. And again, thanks so much for joining us on Off the Hook with Matty D. When did you start fly fishing, and then when did you begin guiding?
Yeah, I started playing around on the fly rod as a young teenager in some farm ponds. You know, playing around bass and bluegills, and then it kind of grew for there. And then I found myself doing some guiding in like very early 90s, like 90, 91, and then realized, you know, I better do this legal and get a license. I think I can admit to that now. I'm past the, you know, what do they call it?
The statute of limitations.
So I ended up getting licensed up in 93, and it just grew from there to where I am now.
And it's grown into a very successful business. You not only guide on the Salmon River, but you also guide on the some of the Western tribs as well. I'm going to bring up your website here. It's Jay Peck Guides, flyfishing.com, Jay Peck Guides, and Lost Rivers Fishing. And you can read more about it. And we'll go through this as well. But you do a lot on the Salmon River, which is where you are now. When do you typically start there and typically finish on the Salmon River and then migrate to other rivers?
Yeah, so generally I'll start out what I call the fall campaign, which is for me kind of like the start of the whole guiding cycle. Usually we start up, I start really kind of being on the river right around, 1st of September. And, you know, basically what I'm doing is I'm just getting myself oriented. There's a few salmon starting around, and then we start picking up right about now. Because I always like tell everybody, if you got to plan a trip, plan the Salmon River from the 15th of September on. Early fish are a bonus fish.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'll be on the salmon until Halloween, and then I shift over to the west, what I call the western tribs of the lake, and I'll do the brown trout thing in western New York, and I leave. I got a head guide that takes care of everything here on the salmon for me for the steelhead fishermen. So I'll do with the team, we'll divide and conquer. I'll take on the brown trout fisheries because that's close to a home base.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll have another gentleman here that takes, Rick Smith, that takes on the steelhead fishing here and through November. And then midwinter, we'll start bouncing back and forth. And then as we get into late winter, I'll really focus on the western tribs again until the middle of April. And then I move back to the Salmon River because I like to be on the western end, because what happens is usually by early March, we usually have our snow runoff, and then everything start to fish well. And the steelhead fisheries crashes probably about middle of April on the west end. And when I move up to the Salmon River, we're still very often have a snow melt. So we're looking at 2,000 CFS of ice water, where I just got done with leaving water temperatures in the 50s. So I can start the whole cycle over again on the Salmon River and finish up like second week of May. Because for the Spey guys that love swinging flies, sometimes that May fishing, that drop back fishing can just be fantastic because you're just swinging flies, and these steelhead they just want to eat. They're just looking for something to run down and crush and make a meal out of.
And you teach a couple, and we're going to get into the different types of fishing there, but you just mentioned it. You actively teach and guide Spey fishermen, which is kind of unique in itself.
Yeah, I do. And it's, I spent a lot of time traveling, learning different techniques, been out west a couple of times, seeing how these guys effectively use the whole technique of Spey cast, the Spey fishing, the sink tip presentation, and then modifying it, bringing it here. And I've been very successful with it, I have to admit. And it's becoming more and more, for me personally, that style of technique to go to presentation for, especially like right now with the Chinooks. The Chinooks like a little action in their fly, so having that little bit of a swing at them really helps.
And the Chinooks or kings, as a lot of people know them, they are a feisty fish to catch. Sometimes you have to entice them a little bit, give them a little, as you said, action, get them a little annoyed to strike. But that old school mentality is kings don't eat is just a bunch of malarkey, because you and I have seen time and time again, they will hit and run.
Yeah, one of the most violent eats I've ever seen on a swing presentation was from a Chinook. My joke is I was a bystander and I got pulled out of my boots. But yeah, Chinooks, they're not eating, they're not feeding, but they're bullies. They're grumpy, they're grouchy. They're just not a pleasant fish in the fish universe. They're not a pleasant fish for other fish to be around, because they get pushed around, nipped at, and everything else. And using that swing presentation, a little bit of action, and that triggers that territorial, I'm just going to pick on you, bully type response. And that's where sometimes you see these guys half asleep and all of a sudden scream because they had the rod just about yanked out of the hand. And that's what's going on. That salmon is just like, yeah, that thing is going to get bit. I've had enough of it.
Right.
So that's what we really work on with that presentation, is that total territorial aggression type of behavior.
You've been fishing the Salmon River when we talked off air, I think, since the 80s. And you've seen a tremendous amount of changes on the Salmon River, both in structure and in regulations. Let's start with regulations here, because really, I think there's been, as we've known, wholesale changes with some of the regulations on the river.
Yeah, back in the 80s, it was legal snagging, and around 93, that got outlawed. And then, of course, it took time because there's such a culture for that. It took a while for people to either leave the fisheries, for lack of a better term, or realize that that it was time to have a change in how they approached the whole resource. And that took time. And so you had this evolution in fishermen that kind of started to change with that. And of course, in between all that, we had to adjust a few regulations to help with enforcement and help encourage that cultural change. And as a result, you see just a tremendous change in it. So for an example, in the past 80s, right up until probably the early 2000s, it was a heavy extraction fisheries. Everybody just extracted a large amount of fish, where now we're seeing a lot more catch and release, a lot more understanding natural reproduction, understanding that those salmon dying in the rivers are positive. So there's been a lot of, in the cultural change of the fishermen, the fact that now we allow these salmon to die in the river. There's been a huge environmental change in the river to the positive. That river was a sterile ditch back in the 80s and 90s, and now all of a sudden it's just this blooming biomass of aquatic life and reproduction, and it's a very, very productive river now.
When you see that evolution as a guide, a conservationist, it's got to make you happy because the river continues to self-sustain.
Yeah, the river, no less, is a self-sustaining. I think as an environment, it's getting stronger. Because it was, it's really kind of fascinating with my background to actually watch something like this happen. I always say give nature half a chance and get out of her way. And here's something that was just lifeless. We've actually watched insect hatches develop that we never saw before. And for an example, you mentioned about natural reproduction earlier. On average now, and this comes from river census, that the Chinook reproduction, a young in a year for just Chinooks that smolt out, is around 20 million a year.
Wow.
Which is just astounding. There's rivers out west that would love to have that reproduction.
That is incredible. I mean, because I didn't know it was that huge.
Yeah.
And that's just in the Salmon River alone.
Yes, the Salmon River alone. Now, the Salmon River is a unique piece of water. There's a couple other creeks can do some of it, but just with the volume, some of the other management we've done with like minimum water flows, it's been able to help. There's sections in there that just got just ideal spawning habitat. So as a result, it's a productive river because and it didn't take much on minimum flows and a little bit of half-hearted care.
Right. And then beside the Chinook reproduction, we also have steelhead reproduction. Atlantics are making a comeback in that river, and browns as well.
Well, the browns are not seeing too much. That's kind of weird because, we don't understand what's going, from what I've been told.
Okay.
They're not finding any young in year browns. They are finding a handful of young in a year Atlantics here and there, which is considering how many Atlantics are actually spawning. I think that's pretty impressive because there's not a lot.
Right.
Maybe a tiny handful of pairs. It would be lucky if we got 50 pairs. We're finding young in year steelhead in there, and they kind of go MIA. And some years I'll see some wild smolts before they get released from the river. So we're definitely getting some, but those, and same thing with the cohos. However, we just haven't sampled or know what those numbers are, and there's been some talk about trying to figure that out. But we do know that there is definitely some reproduction coming out of there.
And one of the things that help with that, you and I, again, talking off air, the regulation of the water flow to control the river, because you said back in the day, it was haphazard. I mean, no flow to 2000 CFS in like 20 seconds. Yeah.
I mean, it's still, so they would, industry's done. We don't need the power. Turn the water off. And then to go, it's about 8:30. Everybody needs their power. We better turn the water on. And that's what it was.
Right. I mean, and once you get that, the process to get that regulated had to be really difficult.
Yeah, I'm going to mention somebody here. That was Fran Veroliva. He was really instrumental in doing that. He was an employee of the department in the fisheries. And of course, he started his days out as a guide on the river. That's when I first encountered him. But he did a career with the department. And that was one of the things that happened back in the late 80s and 90s was the minimum flows. And basically the 185 that we have right now during the summer was designed to cover the river bottom, protect that river bottom, protect that ecosystem. And then the same thing, like in the winter, our minimum flow is 285. It was kind of, at least in the upper part of the river, it's helped to control the anchor ice. And of course, the 350 minimum for summer to help the salmon navigate and run our boats and so on.
Right.
So those are basic rundown of what that was all about.
And we probably should tell people that don't know, the Salmon River is fed by a much larger reservoir, the Redfield Reservoir, and based on how filled or not filled it is this year is how the flows are then regulated.
Right. So, the reservoir, this is a problem we have with that reservoir. It's not a deep reservoir. It's not a big reservoir. It's one of those, you have it, you use it.
Yep.
So one of the little gripes right now is, well, they shouldn't have done the canoe releases, the kayak releases during the summer. It wouldn't have made a difference.
Yeah.
Because we just don't have the volume to store the water. Now, the positive is we get a really good, strong shift in weather and we start getting some serious rainfall. The reservoir will fill quick. I mean, in reality is all we need is a real ugly thunderstorm to come rolling across the lake and dump 3 inches on it, and it will be a positive help.
Right. And the reservoir, of course, is fed by the Tug Hill Plateau, which is why in winter you get all the snow melt. All of a sudden that reservoir is just chock full and they're opening up, 3, 4, 5 gates to 2,000, 3,000 CFS.
Yeah, a 2,000 release during the summer, and what I call the runoff, is not unusual.
Right.
You can almost kind of count on you're going to have a stint of 2,000, and then very often you're going to see a steady flow somewhere around 12 to 1,500 CFS going through there through April. So that's actually kind of normal with all that snow coming off the ground, saturated spring rain. So it can keep things pretty juicy.
I mean, and that helps you because when you have a little bit higher flow, it spreads out the people more. It allows for different techniques of fishing. It allows your clients to maybe stand back a little bit further rather than choking the river out, so to speak.
Yeah, let's use the spring, a couple of different experiences we have. Like right now, we'll go like what we're dealing with right now. The low water flows are all kind of concentrated in the minimum holding waters, the pocket waters. So we lose a lot of ideal holding water.
Yep.
Spawning time, it'll probably be there'll be a lot of decent spawning water. The problem I worry about when I spawn in this low water is when we get to high water, we could scurl out a lot of that spawning beds. I'm not worried about the salmon because there's just so many salmon going to be spawning, so much, have such a saturation.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably not going to make much of a difference. In the spring, what I like to see is consistent flows, because when those fish get set up on spawning habitat, a water flow really bugs them, a drop or a rise. So I just like to see consistent. Yeah, I do like 1,200, 1,500 because I can run the boats easy.
Mm-hmm.
It spreads the fish out, spreads the fishermen out. I got with the Spey rods and the sink tip systems I use, we have no problem covering water, finding these fish. And yeah, and the fish use more of the river, and understanding fish behavior in the river, you have no problem finding fish.
So I think you hit something there, and I want to kind of roll back. So not only do you do wading guiding, but you do drift boat guiding as well.
Yeah. So for me, the boats are a tool in the toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously we're not going to be running them right now because you put the drift boats in there, you're going to go for a 5-mile hike carrying a 300-pound boat. That's a lot of fun. And so for us, they're a tool in the toolbox. So when the water's high and the fish are spread out, the boats work great. Sometimes we'll cast from it's really fun Spey casting out of a drift boat, but we use it more as is our way to taxiing a truck to carry all of our toys and our food and our clothes and rods, and taxi us down to the next round, get out, fish it, and do that. So let's say during the winter, we don't want to step in that ice water, so let's stay in the boats and keep our toes warm. So yeah, for us, it's a tool in the toolkit.
Unlike where I've seen many times on the Salmon River where they're just kind of backpedaling and and using jigs or flashers.
Right. They're basically what we call them pulling plugs. They're using hot shots, quick fish, stuff like that off from plug rods.
Yeah. You're just going place to place and then getting out and really exploring the water.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is an excellent education for the client too. Well, because then you can explain, here's why we're fishing this. This is what, fish could be holding here. And you get that insight into the river, which I think is, again, back to my initial discussion when I introed you. That's what I see when I see you on the river, that discussion, that understanding, that education, because some of your clients are repeat and some might be first time.
Yeah. So I have it's kind of fun. I have a huge repeat group, and as they fish with me for a few years, it actually makes my job easier because I quickly get dialed in. But, a typical conversation, we'll drop down into a run. I'll pull the anchor over, we'll get out, and I'll take them to a section or like the top of the run. And I'll literally just say, all right, this is the run. We're going to fish from this spot down to point A to point B. This is the tip we're going to use because of the depth. This is where I suspect the fish are going to be sitting. This is how you're going to have to make the presentation. So by the time they get done, they just understood, yeah, this is where, they're going to just learn how to read water, understand how to attack it, to make to cover it, fish it, make a good presentation, control the depth through that run. So yeah, they're fishing. I'm there helping them get the fly where it needs to go.
Right. But I think that's important because, and if they're repeat clients, I mean, they're enjoying the day with you as well. And that's, of course, what you're hoping for. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
When you're starting off, in the season, you typically don't start with Spey. You do Spey later on, right? Or do you kind of mix it in depending on the client?
Right now we're actually using a lot of switch rods.
Mm-hmm.
And that could vary from, if somebody's the first time with them and they're new, we're just going to go with switch rods. And a lot of times the people will gravitate over to the full on the 12.5 to 14-foot Spey rods, but that will probably do later on as the water gets up and gets higher. We're just using a lot of 11.5 foot switch rods right now, skeiny lines, maybe some sketch, just because it fits the water at these flows right now.
I got you.
We're just doing a lot of Spey casting. We're running light poly leaders to match the conditions. Mm-hmm. And we're still doing classic casting. We're still swinging, but we're just kind of adjusting the equipment to the conditions.
So you're not dead drifting or high sticking with the switch rods, or are you? And then you're swinging at the end.
The answer to that is yes.
I'm not trying to give away your secrets, by the way.
No. There's no secrets here. So, a lot of times we'll even dead drift off a sink tip. Because we fish are funny. Then one day they'll run down even a salmon will run down and crush a fly. The next day they just want it served up nice and soft to them. So we got to play around with the presentation, see what the mood of the fish are. So sometimes in this low water, the solution is to just go with a full floating setup, a 10-12 foot leader, a bead-headed woolly, and a BB. Mm-hmm. And kind of dead drift it down the slot, and we'll just kind of fish it kind of a dead drift. When the dead drift is in, we'll work the swing, and we'll just see what kind of mood they're in.
Gotcha.
And the reason why we'll go with what I call the old school setup is because it just is, we have an area that's maybe like 4 or 5 feet wide, and we have to get down into that slot there. And if we were running tips, we'll just completely miss it. By the time the fly gets that depth and the swing happens, we got such a narrow window where the fly is actually fishing correctly, where we can just go old school and be a lot more productive or efficient in getting that fly down through fishable, biteable, fishable water. But still, again, in that presentation, we're doing that drift. We're doing two presentations. We're working a dead drift, and we're also working a swing, so we can monitor the behavior of the fish and see what they want that day.
Do you often find that one species, aka salmon versus steelhead, prefer the dead drift versus the swing? Or is it, as you said, just whatever mood the fish is in, salmon will do anything?
Salmon can be moody, especially Chinooks. And so it'll vary quite a bit, So there again, I'll give away one of my secrets. I'm a willy bugger fisher. Why? Okay. Because you can't fish them wrong. So I can do several presentations. And so sometimes even on our dead drift, there's a little bit of action in that, which really helps. And, I find salmon they just like the fly to have a little bit of life to them until there's a lot of eggs in the system. Steelhead, it just depends on their day. I mean, if they get keyed in on eggs, you can hit them with a crowbar and they're not going to look at it unless it's an egg.
Right.
And so you just got to suck it up and drift eggs. Other days they'll be good with that. They'll chase a swinging fly. So a lot of times it just depends on the mood of the fish, and you just have to, be prepared to be flexible with them.
When you're switching from salmon to steelhead, you're getting into, middle to late October, right? Because salmon mostly are kind of going out. Are you then just like, we're starting off this morning with eggs or egg imitation? Are you doing true sacks or are you doing egg imitation flies?
Well, egg sacs stink and slimy and gooey, and I'm getting all my clothing and everything scuzzy, so I don't just don't mess with them.
Good
I got
answer. Because I agree. But I have guys who love it. And I'm like, and I get it. They can outfish me 10-1 because a sack is killer. But I'm like, oh, the smell is on your hands for hours and days.
oh God, it's just, they're disgusting. And I got a whole collection of egg patterns that are very effective.
Mhm.
So I got full confidence in them. And usually when we're shifting over to steelhead, very often it depends on water I'm starting. If I'm in pocket water, I'm going to probably start drifting some egg patterns.
Yep.
If I'm more into runs and pools, I might try swinging off initially, just to see, because I like catching fish on a swing, and so do most of my people.
Yep.
So if somebody's first time out there, they just want to catch a steelhead or two, we're probably just start out in what I call the spawning area, where the fish are up there just chowing on eggs.
Yep.
My joke is steelhead like eggs as much as I like an egg McMuffin. It can be dangerous. So we might start out with that, but a lot of it just kind of like what's the trend is there've been a lot of spawning activity in these areas of the salmon actively dumping eggs and digging that up. Very quickly, those fish could be up on the egg, what I call the egg barf, feeding. So that'll have a lot to do with what's been going on, how I'll start today.
And so there is that for the first timer when they hook into a steelhead, whether it's a dead drifting, an egg imitation, or a swing, there is nothing like it. I mean, explain that rush maybe that you see from a client that's, hit that steelhead for the first time.
Yeah, usually they end up losing it. They'll panic, grab the reel or the line, and the thing will take over. They might get their knuckles bounced off the knob of the reel. Then they kind of look at you with this bizarre look on their face, like, "What was that?" Your fish. That was a steelhead. Because in the fall they can be really hot.
Yeah.
And they're fresh out of the lake. They got the lake strength. The river temperatures in the low to 50s, and biologically they're just jacked up. Okay. And so, you need to get into those things, and they're gonna blow up. It's really, unless you get the really big ones, might have a little start. It might not be as fast startup, but a lot of your average fish, give or take a pound, right around 8 pounds, they're like a bomb going off most days.
Yeah. And even the big ones, they may start off slow, but once they realize, oh, there's a hook in my mouth, they're like, this ain't happening, and they are going back to that lake. Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of joke there's some fish that are just not meant to be landed.
Yeah, for sure. So once you're done with the Salmon River and you go to the Western Tribs, you're picking up, I'm going to pull this up here. I mean, that's gorgeous. Just simply gorgeous. Talk about the Western Tribs, the difference in them compared to the Salmon River, not just in the species of the fish, but the flow of the water is completely different as well.
Yeah, so we're I do especially in November, I do a lot of creek fishing, but the water flows are lower, they're softer. We're not stumbling through the rocks. So yeah, it's much lower water flows and softer water. And and just for that type of fishes too, I call it a hunting fish. A lot of places where I do, we walk the creeks, we hunt, we look for the fish. We find them, we sight fish to them, we kind of crack the code and how they want to eat, and we fish. A lot of runs and pools, and so yeah, the biggest thing is the water volume that we're dealing with is way less.
I find it more relaxing, because when you're on the Salmon River on a normal year, let's say they're releasing 350. Plus what's coming out of, Orwell, plus what's coming out of Trout Brook. By the time you're down in the DSR, you're 550, you're 600, plus runoff, etc. You feel like you're fighting the current the entire time. You step in some of the Western Tribs, you're like, where's the water flow? This is so comfortable.
Yeah. It's the difference between, stumbling over a mountain and walking on a parking lot. Some days it's just way easier.
Yeah.
And I find that a lot of the women that I guide too, they're always worried about the heavy currents and the big rocks on the Salmon River. And we go over into my Western Tribs, and they just find it, they're just a lot more relaxed. They find it easier to get around, and they're a lot more comfortable over there.
Yeah, it is different. And are you still using switch rods on those Western Tribs? I guess it depends on the size of the water, or are you doing Spey?
Yeah, so actually, Now, my favorite creek rod's a 10.5 foot 6 weight. I got set up as a little switch rod.
Okay.
But the reality of the size of what we're fishing, generally we just stay with like 10 foot 7 weights. That just seems to fit those creeks really well.
Yeah.
And it's about the ideal for that. And it's just the nature, the size of the water.
Right.
We're fishing, it's pretty intimate. So even the 11-foot switches are just a bit big.
And when you're fishing for browns, there still are some steel in the western tribs.
Yep.
They look and act different to me than the Salmon River.
Yeah, so there's still that same lake, the Salmon River steelhead that we see from the Salmon River. We still get those, no doubt, because they all came from the same place, the Altmar Hatchery.
Right.
But one of the creeks that I fish actually has some documented natural reproduction of rainbows, and they have a very unique look to them. They're a fall spawner, and we bump into those fish primarily kind of late November in any real numbers.
Okay.
And so we start getting a mixed bag into those, and we'll bump into them. And the other thing we've been starting to do too out there is bump into a few Atlantic salmon.
That's what I was going to ask. Yep.
Yeah.
There seems to be more and more Atlantics that at least I'm hearing about and physically seeing in my group when we go and fish those western tribs. And it really is nice to see. I mean, it's a gorgeous fish.
Yeah. It's, I didn't bump into any too many last year because I knew the stocking numbers were definitely they had an issue with the stocking on this year class. But in the past, it's been almost a given routine to run into these fish almost on a daily basis.
And when your clients
I'm hoping that's back this year.
Yeah, for sure. When your clients run into Atlantic, they're pleasantly surprised because, again, compared to a brown, which is what you're probably targeting most of the time, it's a completely it's ballistic.
Yeah, so you hook a brown trout, and they're big head shakes, kind of brawlers. They don't run much, and then you hit an Atlantic salmon, the thing's digging holes in the river.
Yeah, it really makes for a heck of a fight for sure.
Yeah.
Jay, one of the things I've noticed, in following you for a number of years, you do a really great job. I want to bring this up here on your YouTube page, Jay Peck Guides, Lost Rivers Fishing. You can find it on YouTube. You do, at least some sort of video every couple of days to update clients, friends, the general public as to what's going on, where you're fishing. This is a lot of work.
Yeah, so I try to do at least once a week, this time of year, do a fishing report update. I found a lot of people are really looking for them. They're really popular, and usually I can get them done relatively easy, because, I'm guiding first, I'm a YouTuber second.
Right.
And so trying to get the fishing reports done, at least they work pretty good. Sometimes you'll see me sitting on a rock down at Pineville or on the river, and everybody really looks to them. So I try to get them done, and then I try to get a couple fishing videos up through the season too. So yeah, it's a bit of work, especially on the end of the day when you're pretty tired and your brain ain't operating like it should. Then sit down and get all this done. But I know a few times I tried to sit down and do fishing reports, and there's been about 8 or 10 attempts.
And you're doing them all yourself. Not like you have a team. Your team is Jay Peck, you.
Yeah. No, I got a few of the guys that help me with the guide work. Sometimes when we can get together, we'll get together and try to get on the river and shoot a video. And that usually those river videos, when everybody's together, we need about 2 days to do it. And it's kind of nice when I can get the whole the rest of the guys together, and we can, part of it is we can fish together, which is a rarity these days.
Right.
And also, then it's nice we get people on the camera all the time. And yeah.
Really, really some good stuff. Also, not only that, but you regularly update your Instagram as well. Let me just pull that up there, just with maybe simple pictures, or this one was a great joke. Do I have enough rods? How many will I break this year? Kind of a thing. Are my leaders all set? And your Facebook page as well in Jay Peck Guides. So you got a lot going on, which is really great. I think that kind of helps the average person that's just looking for information, because we all know social media might be sometimes not the correct information. Let's just leave it that way.
Yeah, yeah. So, for me, I use social media as a way for twofolds, like the Instagram and the Facebooks as a way to maintain connection with everybody. They can follow along on what's going on. I can put some stuff out. The YouTube there, I try to be entertaining, not much of a goofball, and put out some good information, because like you said, there's just a lot of stuff out there, and some of it's better than others, and I try to be the better than others person. And so that's so I there and try to keep everything positive,
which is really good. Let's talk about booking you as a guide. You said you have a lot of repeat clients, so that's great for you. But if I'm a first-time client and I want to attempt this style of fishing, is it best to give you a call, drop you an email first, and say, "Hey, look, I fished the Salmon River, once or twice, but I really want to do it correctly"? Or, I mean, what's the best way to go about getting in touch with you to begin?
I'm kind of old school, so I always like to talk to people, but send an email, introducing yourself. I'm interested in this. I got a trip planned for such and such time. You usually got to get out to me, especially in the fall, a few months ahead of time, because all my people there, as soon as they start making their lodging and all that, usually in June, July, they're quickly figuring out what their lodge dates are and their time off, and getting a hold of me and getting everything squared away. So, so that's usually like for fall, in the spring, over the winter, you want to start looking at, I usually like to start talking to people in February. The problem with the spring thing is a lot of that has to do with snowpacks, winter weather, our timing, when I think we're going to shift out of our winter mode into our spring mode. So usually I like to start that conversation in spring.
Okay.
Around February, because at that point we know just how deep the snow is in Tug Hill Plateau, if people can see out the kitchen windows with the snow or not. And so that's usually when I start really like to start putting everything together. And plus then I know when things are going to start breaking loose here out in around home base in Western New York, because I usually start my spring fisheries there.
Gotcha. And what if the flow is too much on, let's say, the Salmon River? Do you safety first? We're gonna cancel and rebook a different day. Yeah.
Well, safety is always first, but there's always a couple of options. I know I've successfully fished the Salmon River in 3600. You just you're limited with your options, obviously.
Yep.
And the other thing is sometimes we'll retreat to, usually if the salmon's high, we can retreat to the creeks, Trout Brook, Orwell's creek fishing, and river fishing, or we can move north to the Sandies, and sometimes they'll actually be in water be a little bit lower, water temperature a little bit warmer, and we'll fish up in there, and we can have some success while the salmon's kind of smartening up.
Gotcha.
So, but yeah, it's so for an example, we have a policy of over 2,000 CFS. We don't run the drift boats. A lot of guys like to run it in 5,000, but the reality is you don't have a lot of water you can effectively fish, especially the way we like to fish.
Right.
And, there's no guarantee we could go around the corner at 350 and find a tree down in front of us, but at least, it's a lot easier to get the boat off to the side and slow things down and then it is at 3,600.
Sure.
You go around there, you're going to barely have enough time to say no crap. So that's one of the reasons why we do it is, plus we've had a lot of erosion on the rivers. So,
yep.
It's a safety thing for, like when we get over 2,000 with the drift boats, and And well, that's a judgment call at that point. And then if it gets too big and we're not too comfortable on or have a reasonably good plan on the salmon and the high water, we usually go to the creeks or we go to the other ones.
Once a client has, firmed that date with you and they've booked you, what do they need to bring to have a successful day with you?
Generally, what they need to do is just be prepared for the weather. Bring your waders, make sure you dress properly. I got the rods, I got the flies, I got all the equipment. If you want to use your own gear, by all means, bring it. I'll make sure you set up right. If you're a Spey guy and you're just getting into it and you got a Spey rod, I encourage you to bring it, because what we'll do is I'll make sure your rod's set up right. And we can get you some casting instruction with it so you get comfortable with it. But yeah, bring your gear, and if you don't have the gear, it's like right now, I think I got something like 10 rods in the truck.
So
I got 6 of them ready to go.
so basically, we need New York State fishing license. We need
that's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, let's not. And obviously waders, boots, and 100%. We got to tell people, no matter what river you're on in upstate New York, make sure you have some sort of cleats. Do not just go with felt, because felt is an automatic. We're going to take a bath today.
Yeah, especially on the salmon, there's a slime on there that'll fill up those felts, and it's kind of like, might as well put some axle grease on the bottom of your boots. So you want to have some sort of metals, like some of the Western tribs you find with felts. But my father-in-law was a big fan of felts and spikes. I'm a big fan of the rubber and spikes because walking along the trail and felts on mud is pretty bad.
Yeah, it really is.
But you want to have some good metal on the bottom of your feet
for sure. And again, especially as we said for the salmon, because we've all gone down. Sometimes every year, maybe. I don't know. Could have happened.
Well, look, for an example, I've already had one swimmer for the year, and I did, after we pulled them out of the river, we're sitting there laughing at ourselves, and I always say, well, if you're going to wade in the river, you will go down.
That's right. Exactly.
We all do.
We all do, for sure. And then you mentioned if you have your own Spey rod and you would set it up and do a little casting on the river to teach people, because there is it's not overhand casting. It's completely different. Is there a certain or two types of cast that you like to teach people on Spey casting, or is it just keep it simple?
Well, the KISS rule is always really good. Keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
But generally what I'll do is, so I'll give you a quick rundown on what we do. It's like I do a Spey casting clinic just before we start with a roll cast.
Mm-hmm.
That teaches you to use your bottom hand, stop the rod tip high. Then generally what I like to do is have like a double Spey for one side of the river and like a circle C or a cat arm cast for the other side of the river. So you got to cast for both sides of the river. And then we just build off from that. But generally what we do is for fishing, I want to get you on the water anyway. So as we're on one side of the river, I'll show you a cast that works for you and get you doing that. Then we get on the other side, then I'll show you another cast for the other side. And in between all that, usually I show you the cleaner your mess up with a roll cast. And I do that because it's a good way to train your brain and your hands to work the way they should with a Spey rod.
And I think you really hit on something there. So I do Spey fish as well. I mean, I switch rod, I Spey fish, and there's a dominant hand when the river is flowing a certain way, and to go the opposite way, it can be, you have to retrain your brain to fight with the current or allow the current work with you, depending on what it is.
Actually, your biggest struggle is because you be that same group. Friends of mine, and I taught their kids to cast both one hand, two hand at the same time, so they don't have this problem. But we learned with one-handed rods. So we're very top hand dominant in our casting, so that when we go to a two-handed rod, it now becomes your weak hand becomes the dominant hand in your casting. So so your bottom hand. So if you're right-handed, now your left hand does the work off on the bottom of the rod. So that's our first problem. I tell everybody, you're going to be fighting your dominant hand. Just give it. The other thing is we're used to dropping a rod tip and shooting at a target.
Mm-hmm.
So my thing is we're shooting at woodchucks with the rod tip. Now we're shooting ducks. So we got to learn to stop that rod tip high.
Yeah.
And so we have a tendency to overdrive with our top hand and drop that rod tip, and that's our struggle that's 90% of our struggle with our casting.
Is that
And
that
of
hard
course,
stop?
Right. The other problem is when it ain't working, what do? We just try harder, we hit it harder, we use more muscle, we go faster, and that doesn't work. So a lot of times what you need to do is just relax, be a little bit more deliberate, use that bottom hand, use that top hand. There's a couple coaching techniques they use to help you with that issue. And sometimes I have to do some of those slow motion coaching tricks on myself because I'll fall right into that problem.
I mean, we all do. We forget that rod is 14 feet and it does more work than our shoulders and arms are going to do. So let the rod do the work.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's a technique game, not a muscle game.
Right, for sure. You were also part of this year's Spey clinic up in on the Salmon River, weren't you?
No, the Spey Clave, no, I wasn't part of that this year. I might be next year. I was talking to one of the organizers about maybe doing a demo, but I do the weekend before Labor Day weekend, I always run a Spey casting clinic of my own.
Okay.
And that's basically it's a 4-hour clinic that we do in the mornings. It's basically designed to either get you tuned up or introduce you to the rods and get you rolling for the season.
It's a really good. How many people will you have on that? About 5 to 10?
So what we do is we max the class out at 5 people.
Okay.
Myself and Rick Smith will be the instructor, so it's a 5-to-1 ratio, which we found is about perfect. It's enough to keep us busy, keep us moving, and it's also enough people to keep us out of your hair. So we'll come in, we'll show you a couple of things, and you need time to be left alone and figure it out and make it happen. You don't need your instructor hovering over you.
Nothing says failure than the guide who can cast standing on your right-hand shoulder the whole time.
Yeah, and sometimes we can work with you a little bit. Then you just need to be left alone and work through it and get it processed and make it happen. And, so that's what we do, the 5-to-1 ratio. That seems to work really good.
And when you're doing this clinic, this could be for a newbie, advanced. It's just about either beginning from scratch or the whole tune-up of the whole thing.
Correct, because once again, it's a 5-to-1. We can go to you and modify what you need.
Yep.
And so we've had people that have had a problem like Pacific Cast join in. We've helped them through it. To somebody like, okay, this is a 2-handed rod. Remember, use 2 hands, not 1 hand.
Yeah.
So I mean that basic to I got a problem with my casting, would like to get it fixed.
Gotcha. Great. Hey, Jay, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on for nearly the past hour. I wish you all the best for the remainder of the season. Is there anything else that you would like me to talk about that we haven't hit? I mean, I think we've covered quite a bit.
Yeah, we covered it pretty good. It was definitely enjoyed visiting with you.
I appreciate it. I wish you the best for the rest of the upcoming season. Hold on for one quick second, please. Yep. Again, we have been chatting with Jay Peck of Jay Peck's Guide Fishing, Jay Peck's Guide and Lost Rivers. You can check them out again at jpecksguideflyfishing.com. Find out more about hiring Jay. Find out about maybe on the water, the Spey casting clinic that he does in August, what you need. And of course, don't forget about his YouTube page where he, as he says, he tries to make it fun and enjoyable, but also informative about what's going on the rivers that he's fishing, and his Facebook and Instagram pages as well. And again, JPEC5 on Instagram. Once again, this has been Off the Hook with Matty D. Thank you so much for joining me. And don't forget, we'll have another episode dropping next week. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Off the Hook with Matty D.